This video is meant to help you relax or drift into sleep. We're exploring 3 Egyptian mysteries tonight. The journey of Ra through darkness, the weighing of hearts in Osiris's hall, the whispers of an ancient tomb. Before we start, if you think you might fall asleep, leave a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Please like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. It really does help. Now get comfortable. Make sure everything is settled for the night. Turn off the lights, let your breathing slow, and say hello in the comments if you're still awake. It's time to close your eyes and let these old stories carry you somewhere quiet. Story 1. The Dismembered God, Osiris and the Weighing of the Heart. The Green King of the Nile. Along the banks of the Nile, where water meets fertile earth, there once ruled a king whose very presence brought life to the land. His name was Osiris. He wore a crown of white, tall and elegant, marking him as Lord of Upper Egypt. Green was his skin, the color of growing things, of shoots pushing through dark soil after the flood. The Nile rose and fell with the seasons. Each year, the river swelled beyond its banks, covering the fields in rich, dark silt. When the waters retreated, farmers pressed seeds into the mud. Barley grew. Wheat grew. The cycle continued, patient and sure. The river itself seemed to recognize Osiris as kin. Where he walked along its banks, reeds grew thicker. Fish swam closer to the surface as if drawn by his presence. Crocodiles, those ancient terrors of the deep waters, would drift past him without threat. Even the hippopotamus, dangerous and unpredictable, grew calm when he approached. This was not magic in the way of spells and incantations. This was something older. A harmony between the ruler and the ruled, between the land and its keeper. Osiris did not command nature, he simply understood it. He knew when the flood would come by watching the stars. He knew which fields needed rest by tasting the soil. He knew when to plant by listening to the wind. Osiris taught these rhythms to his people. He showed them when to plant and when to harvest. Under his guidance, granaries filled, children grew strong. The land prospered in ways it had not known before. His queen stood beside him always. Isis, they called her. She was wisdom itself, wrapped in linen and crowned with the throne hieroglyph. Her devotion to Osiris ran deeper than the Nile, constant as the northern stars. Where he brought order to the fields, she brought order to the heart. Together they were balance made flesh. The palace overlooked the river. At dawn, Osiris would stand on the terrace and watch the sun paint the water gold. Fishermen cast their nets. Farmers walked to their plots. The world moved with purpose, gentle and deliberate. There was no rush in those days. Time itself seemed to flow like the river, broad and steady. The morning light had a particular quality in those years. Soft, forgiving. It fell across the valley in sheets of amber, making even the humblest mud brick home glow like copper. Birds sang from the acacia trees. Doves cooed from the eaves of granaries. The air smelled of baking bread and fresh water, of donkeys and dust and life continuing as it had for generations. Osiris knew the names of the farmers who worked the nearest fields. He knew which families had newborns, which elders were failing, which young couples were planning marriage. He was not distant like some rulers who saw their people only as numbers, as tribute counted and labor extracted. He walked among them. He listened to their concerns. He settled their disputes under the shade of date palms where everyone could see that justice was being done. In the evenings, Isis would join him on the terrace. They spoke little. Words were not always needed between them. The breeze carried the scent of lotus blossoms. Ibis birds waded in the shallows, hunting for fish. Somewhere downstream, a child laughed. These were the sounds of peace. Sometimes they would sit for hours, watching the sun descend behind the western cliffs. The sky would burn orange, then pink, then purple. Stars would emerge one by one, like flowers opening in a celestial garden. The river would darken to black glass, reflecting the heavens. In those moments, it was impossible to tell where earth ended and sky began. But in every story of light, shadow finds its way. Set was Osiris's brother. Where Osiris embodied the green fertility of the valley, Set belonged to the red desert beyond. His hair was the color of rust. His eyes held the restlessness of wind-blown sand. He ruled the barren places, the storms that brought no rain, the heat that cracked stone. At first, Set seemed content with his domain. He walked the dunes and spoke to the creatures that lived where nothing grew. Scorpions followed him, serpents coiled in his shadow. He understood the language of dry places, the silence of sand stretching to the horizon. Yet something gnawed at him. Perhaps it was the laughter that rose from the valley. Perhaps it was the way people spoke Osiris's name with reverence, while his own name brought only caution. The desert does not feed children. It does not fill granaries. It simply endures. Set began to visit the palace more often. He sat at banquets, smiling, raising his cup when toasts were made, but his gaze lingered on Osiris's crown. His fingers drummed against the table. When Isis spoke of the harvest, Set looked away toward the window, Alma toward the red horizon where his true kingdom waited. The desert shaped those who spent time in it. It taught harsh lessons, survival above sentiment, strength over kindness. The desert did not forgive weakness. A traveler who ran out of water did not receive mercy. A creature too slow to catch prey simply starved. This was the world. Set understood. This was the lens through which he viewed everything. He could not comprehend why Osiris gave grain to families whose crops had failed, why help those too weak to help themselves. In the desert, the weak perished. This was natural. This was right. But Osiris acted as though compassion were strength rather than foolishness. Set watched farmers bring their tribute to the palace. They brought grain, yes, but less than they might have. Osiris accepted what they offered and never demanded more. Set would have demanded double. He would have taken what was owed and then some to remind them who held power. But the people loved Osiris. They sang songs about him during planting season. They named children after him. When he passed through villages, they rushed out to see him, to touch his hand, to receive his blessing. No one sang songs about Set. When he traveled, people hid inside their homes until he passed. Children were warned to stay clear of him. His blessing was feared, not sought. Resentment is a patient thing. It builds grain by grain, like sand collecting in a depression. At first, there's only a small pile, then a dune, then an entire desert, vast and impossible to cross. Set began to imagine. In his mind, he saw himself wearing the white crown. He saw people bowing to him, not from fear, but from gratitude. He would be the one teaching the rhythms of the earth. He would be the one standing beside Isis at dawn. These thoughts took root. They grew in the dark places of his heart where even he did not like to look. The desert teaches survival above all else. In the desert, the strong endure and the weak become bones bleached white under the sun. Osiris noticed nothing. He was too busy with the work of kingship, the endless details of keeping a civilization alive. There were disputes to settle, fields to measure, prayers to offer. He trusted his brother. Why would he not? They shared blood. They had played together as children before crowns and kingdoms divided them. Isis, however, saw. Women often do. She watched Set's eyes track her husband across the room. She noticed how Set's jaw tightened when people praised Osiris. She said nothing at first. What could she say? Suspicion without proof is merely nervousness. And Set was family. The seasons turned. The Nile rose and fell. Osiris continued his work, unaware that in the desert his brother was crafting plans more intricate than any irrigation system. Set was patient. He understood that a direct challenge would fail. Osiris was beloved. The people would defend him. The other gods favored him. No, this would require something more subtle, something that looked like accident or celebration rather than betrayal. He began to commission craftsmen, a carpenter here, a goldsmith there, and each was given a piece of a larger puzzle. None knew what they were truly building. Set paid them well and told them to speak to no one. Months passed. The craftsmen worked. Set waited. In the palace, life continued its peaceful rhythm. Osiris walked among his people. He blessed newborns. He settled arguments between neighbors. He was not a distant king, but one who knew the names of farmers, who stopped to help a man fix a broken plow. At night, he and Isis would retreat to their chambers. She would rest her head against his chest and listen to his heartbeat. It was steady, reliable, like everything else about him. She felt safe there. She believed nothing could disturb the order they had built together. But order is fragile. It exists only because enough people agree to maintain it. Once that agreement breaks, chaos rushes in like water through a cracked dam. The craftsmen finished their work. They delivered their creation to Set under cover of darkness. He examined it by lamplight, running his hands over the smooth surface. It was perfect, beautiful even. No one would suspect. Set announced a banquet. He would host it himself in honor of his brother's continued prosperity. Osiris was surprised but pleased. Perhaps Set had finally made peace with his lot. Perhaps brotherly affection would win over jealousy. Isis felt uneasy. She could not name the source of her worry, but it sat in her stomach like a stone. Still, she could not refuse. To decline would insult Set and appear paranoid. So she dressed in her finest linen and walked beside Osiris to Set's hall. The hall blazed with torches. Musicians played gentle melodies on harps and flutes. Servants moved between guests with platters of roasted duck, fresh bread, dates soaked in honey. Wine flowed freely. The air smelled of cinnamon and myrrh. The torches cast dancing shadows on the walls. Smoke rose in lazy spirals toward the ceiling. The musicians sat in an alcove, their fingers moving across strings, their breath flowing through reed instruments. The music was pleasant, carefully chosen to put guests at ease. Nothing jarring, nothing unexpected, just rhythm and melody washing over the gathering like warm water. Guests reclined on cushions, talking and laughing. Nobles from distant provinces had traveled to attend. Priests blessed the gathering. Even common people lined the outer courtyard, hoping to catch a glimpse of the festivities through the columns. Set had spared no expense. The wine came from the finest vineyards. The duck had been roasted with honey and herbs until the skin turned golden and crisp. Fresh pomegranates sat in bronze bowls, figs stuffed with nuts. Bread still warm from the oven. Set played the generous host. He laughed at jokes. He complimented guests. He refilled cups himself, making sure everyone felt welcome. Osiris relaxed. This was good. This was how brothers should be. Isis, however, remained alert. She noticed how Set's eyes never quite matched his smile. She saw how his attention kept drifting to Osiris, tracking him as he moved through the room. But what could she say? Set was being nothing but gracious. To voice suspicion without evidence would seem paranoid, would insult their host, would create discord where there appeared to be only harmony. So she stayed silent. She stayed close to Osiris. She barely touched her wine. As the night deepened, Set clapped his hands. The music stopped. Servants brought out a large object draped in fine cloth. The guests leaned forward, curious. Set smiled. He pulled away the cloth. Beneath was a chest, a sarcophagus of extraordinary beauty. It was made of cedar and ebony, inlaid with gold and lapis lazuli. Intricate carvings covered every surface, images of stars, rivers, birds in flight. The craftsmanship was breathtaking. Even Isis, who mistrusted the gesture, found herself admiring the work. Set spoke loudly enough for all to hear. He had commissioned this chest as a gift, he said, but he wanted to give it to whomever it fit best. A game of sorts. Anyone could try lying inside. If it fit perfectly, it was theirs to keep. The guests laughed. What a strange but delightful idea. One by one they tried. Some were too tall, others too short or too broad. Each time Set shook his head with mock disappointment. Not quite right. Finally, Osiris stood. He approached the chest, more to humor his brother than from any desire to own it. He looked down at the interior, lined with soft fabric. It did seem comfortable. He climbed inside. He lay down, fitting his shoulders into the space, like stretching his legs. The chest embraced him like it had been made to hold him, and only him. Because it had been. Set moved faster than thought. He slammed the lid shut. Before anyone could react, before Osiris could push it open, Set's servants rushed forward with nails and molten lead. They sealed the lid with brutal efficiency. The sound of hammering filled the hall, sharp and final. Guests screamed, some ran, others stood frozen, unable to process what they were seeing. Isis lunged toward the chest, but Set's men held her back. She struggled, but they were many and strong. Inside the chest, Osiris pounded against the lid. His voice came muffled, then weaker, then silent. Set ordered the chest carried to the river. His men obeyed. They lifted it, heavy now with its precious cargo, and walked through the darkness to the Nile's edge. Without ceremony, they pushed it into the water. The current took it. The chest drifted downstream, turning slowly, reflecting starlight on its golden surface. It floated past sleeping villages, past fields waiting for seed, past everything Osiris had built and loved. The Nile carried it away into the night. Isis and the scattered pieces, Isis broke free too late. She ran to the river's edge, but the chest was already gone, swallowed by darkness and water. She fell to her knees in the mud, her fine linen soaking through. The river moved past her, indifferent. It had carried away her husband, her love, her reason for drawing breath. She did not weep at first. Shock held her frozen. Her mind could not accept what had happened. Just hours ago they had been together, safe in their chambers. Now he was gone, sealed in darkness, alone. Set's men had fled. The guests had scattered. She was alone on the riverbank with only the stars as witnesses. When the tears finally came, they came hard. She wept until her throat burned, until her eyes swelled, until there was nothing left inside her but hollowness. The sound of her grief carried across the water, and somewhere the gods turned their heads and listened. But grief alone solves nothing. As dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Isis stood. Her eyes were red, her hair tangled, her dress ruined, but her jaw was set. Osiris was not gone, not truly. Not yet. The chest was somewhere. She would find it. She began walking. She followed the river's course, asking everyone she met if they had seen a golden chest floating past. Fishermen shook their heads. Farmers had noticed nothing. Children playing by the water had seen only the usual debris, broken reeds, a dead fish, foam swirling in eddies. Days turned to weeks. Isis walked until her feet bled, until sun and wind chapped her lips and burned her skin. She slept under trees or in the shelter of abandoned buildings. She ate whatever people offered, bread, dates, sometimes nothing at all. The sun beat down on her without mercy. Her fine linen dress, once white and pristine, became stained with dust and sweat. The hem tore on thorns. Her sandals wore through. She continued barefoot, the soles of her feet hardening against stone and sand. At night, she lay awake watching stars wheel overhead. Constellations told stories of other gods, other times. She traced patterns in the sky, the bull, the scorpion, the great ship sailing toward dawn. Osiris had taught her those patterns. They had stood together on the terrace, his finger pointing, his voice soft as he named each star. Now she lay alone under those same stars, and they offered no comfort. She passed through villages where people stared, but did not approach. A disheveled woman asking strange questions about floating chests. They thought her mad or cursed. Some threw stones to drive her away. Others left food at a distance, the way one might feed a stray dog. She did not blame them. How could she explain? Even if she revealed her true identity, would they believe? A goddess brought this low, reduced to begging for scraps of information? Pride meant nothing anymore. Dignity was a luxury she could not afford. She would crawl if it meant finding Osiris. She would humiliate herself before crowds, would endure mockery and abuse, would walk until her legs gave out beneath her. Word of her search spread. Some pitied her. Others whispered that grief had driven her mad. A queen wandering like a beggar, asking about a chest. Surely she had lost her mind. But Isis knew the truth of love. It does not yield to reason. It does not calculate odds. It simply persists, step after step, up mile after mile, until the beloved is found or the seeker collapses. She crossed into foreign lands. The Nile flowed through many kingdoms before reaching the sea. In one such place, ruled by a king whose name has been forgotten, Isis heard whispers. A beautiful chest had washed ashore and become lodged in the roots of a tamarisk tree. The tree had grown around it with unnatural speed, its trunk swelling to encase the chest completely. The local king, impressed by the tree's size and beauty, had it cut down. He used the massive trunk as a pillar in his palace. It stood in the great hall, holding up the ceiling, admired by all who saw it. Isis arrived at the palace disguised as a common woman. She sought work as a servant. The queen had recently given birth and needed a nursemaid. Isis offered her services. She was hired. Each night after the household slept, Isis would approach the pillar. She ran her hands over the bark, feeling for the chest hidden within. She whispered to Osiris, telling him she had come, that she would free him soon. During the day, she cared for the royal infant with such tenderness that the queen grew to trust her completely. The child thrived under her care. But Isis's mind was always on the pillar, on the man sealed within. One night, she revealed herself. Her disguise fell away like water, and she stood before the shocked queen as Isis, goddess and queen of Egypt. She explained everything, the betrayal, the chest, the pillar that held her husband's body. The queen, moved by such devotion, agreed immediately. The pillar would be cut open, Osiris would be freed. Craftsmen set to work. They split the wood carefully, revealing at last the golden chest still sealed and intact. Isis wept again, but these were different tears. She had found him. She carried the chest back to Egypt. The journey was long, but she felt no weariness. Osiris was with her again. She would take him home. She would find a way to restore him. Magic was her domain. Surely there was a spell, a ritual, some method to breathe life back into his body. She hid the chest in the marshes of the delta among the papyrus reeds where Set would not think to look. Then she went to gather the herbs and instruments she needed for the resurrection ritual. But Set had spies everywhere. Word reached him that Isis had returned, that she had recovered Osiris's body. Rage filled him. He had worked so hard, planned so carefully. It could not be undone now. He went to the marshes. He found the chest. He opened it. Osiris's body lay within, preserved by the cedar wood and the ceiling lead. He looked almost alive, as though merely sleeping. Set stared down at his brother's face. Even in death, Osiris appeared peaceful, noble. It stoked Set's fury further. Set would make certain Isis could not restore him. He would scatter Osiris so completely that no magic could gather him again. He tore the body apart. Limb from limb, piece from piece, he dismembered Osiris with methodical brutality. When he finished, he had 14 parts. Some say more, the number varies in the telling. He took these pieces and scattered them across the length of Egypt, one in the north, one in the south, others in between. He threw them into rivers, buried them in sand, hid them where no one would find them. Then he left, satisfied. Let Isis search now. Let her wander forever. She would find nothing but fragments. And what good were fragments? Isis returned to find the chest open and empty. Blood stained the reeds. She understood immediately what Set had done. Another woman might have collapsed in despair. Another might have abandoned hope. But Isis had already crossed kingdoms on foot. She had already endured weeks of searching. She would do it again and again. However long it took, she began the search anew. This time, she brought her sister Nephthys to help. Together, they combed Egypt from its northern marshes to its southern cataracts. They asked questions in every village. They investigated every rumor. Nephthys was gentler than Isis in appearance, softer spoken, but beneath that gentleness lived steel. She had married Set, a union meant to bind the desert and the valley, but she had never loved him. She had seen his cruelty, his coldness. When Isis came to her asking for help, Nephthys did not hesitate. The two sisters made an effective team. Where Isis's intensity frightened people, Nephthys's calm reassured them. Where Nephthys grew discouraged, Isis's determination pulled them forward. They questioned fishermen, farmers, merchants. They searched riverbanks and sand dunes. They climbed into caves and descended into tombs. Slowly, piece by piece, they found him, an arm in a fishing net, tangled with reeds and river weed. The fisherman who discovered it was terrified, certain it was cursed. Isis paid him in gold and took the arm, cradling it like a child. She wept over it, this piece of her beloved. She wrapped it in linen and anointed it with oil. A leg buried in a field, unearthed when a farmer's plow struck something hard. The farmer dug down, expecting stone. Instead, he found flesh preserved as though death had occurred yesterday. He sent word to the temple. The priests sent word to Isis. A hand discovered in a clay jar, hidden in an abandoned house. No one knew how it got there. No one knew who had hidden it. Isis claimed it without explanation. Each fragment they discovered, they preserved with sacred oils and wrapped in linen. They sang prayers over each part, treating every piece with the reverence due a king. The search took years. The sisters grew older, their hair streaked with gray, their bodies worn from travel, but they did not stop. In the southern territories, they found a foot. In the northern marshes, the other hand. In the western desert, buried beneath a cairn of stones, they found his torso. Each discovery brought both joy and sorrow, joy that another piece had been recovered, sorrow that he had been scattered so thoroughly. Finally, they had found all but one piece. Set had thrown it into the Nile and a fish had swallowed it. It was gone, irretrievable. But Isis was resourceful. She fashioned a replacement from gold and wood, blessed it with spells, and joined it to the rest. She brought all the pieces to a secret place, a temple hidden from Set's eyes. There, with Nephthys and the god Anubis to assist, she began the work of restoration. They laid the pieces on a table in the correct order, reconstructing the body like a puzzle. Isis spoke incantations passed down from the oldest gods. She anointed each part with oils of frankincense and myrrh. She wrapped the body in linen, layer upon layer, binding it together not just physically but spiritually. The ritual took days. Each layer of linen required its own blessing. Each joint where two pieces met needed special attention, special words to knit the flesh back together. Isis spoke until her voice grew hoarse. She continued speaking. She would not stop until it was done. Nephthys and Anubis chanted in harmony. The sound filled the temple, resonating in the stone. Candles flickered. Shadows danced on the walls. The temple itself was ancient, older than any living memory. It had been built in a time when the gods walked more freely among humans, when the boundary between divine and mortal was less rigid. The stones remembered those days. They held power in their very substance, accumulated over centuries of prayer and sacrifice. Outside, the world continued unaware. Farmers planted and harvested. Merchants haggled in markets. Children played in dusty streets. Inside the temple, time moved differently. Hours stretched or compressed. Day and night lost meaning. There was only the work, the ritual, the slow and patient act of bringing someone back from beyond. Isis leaned close to Osiris's face. She breathed into his mouth, sharing her life force. She spread her wings, for she could take the form of a kite, a bird of morning, and fanned air across his body. Her wings beat with a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. Feathers brushed against the wrapped form, each touch carrying intention, carrying love, carrying the desperate need for him to return. She sang as she flew, a wordless melody that was half prayer, half command. Come back, come back, come back. The candles burned lower, wax pooled on the floor. The scent of frankincense grew so thick it was almost visible, hanging in the air like fog. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Osiris's chest rose, a breath, shallow but real. His eyes opened. They focused on Isis. Recognition dawned in them. He tried to speak, but his voice was faint, distant, as though coming from far away. Isis smiled through her tears. He was back. Not fully, not as he had been, but back nonetheless. However, something had changed. Osiris no longer belonged entirely to the world of the living. He had crossed too far into death's territory. His body, though restored, could not sustain life as it once had. He was caught between realms now, one foot in each. He could not return to his throne. He could not walk openly under the sun. The land of the living was no longer his domain. But there was another kingdom that needed a ruler. The realm of the dead, the duat, stretched vast and largely ungoverned. Souls arrived there confused and frightened. They needed guidance. They needed judgment. They needed a king who understood both life and death. Osiris descended to the underworld. He took his place on a throne in the Hall of Two Truths. He would rule there, not as he had in Egypt, but in a new way. He would oversee the passage of souls. He would ensure that death was not an end, but a transformation. Isis remained in the world above. She bore Osiris a son, conceived in that brief moment of restoration. She named him Horus. She raised him in secret, teaching him everything his father had known. One day, Horus would reclaim the throne from Set, but that is another story. For now, Osiris sat in his new throne and waited for the first souls to arrive. The Hall of Two Truths. The Hall of Two Truths exists outside normal space. It is not precisely below the earth, nor is it in some distant heaven. It simply is, occupying its own plane of existence where the rules of the living world do not apply. The hall stretches longer than any temple built by human hands. 42 pillars line its length, each representing one of the 42 divine judges. These pillars are not stone, but something else, something that shifts between solid and translucent depending on how you look at them. They seem to breathe, expanding and contracting in a rhythm slower than any living heartbeat. Light in the hall comes from no obvious source. There are no torches, no windows, no sun or moon, yet everything is visible, illuminated by a glow that seems to emanate from the air itself. It is neither warm nor cold, it simply is. The floor beneath is smooth as polished obsidian but does not reflect. Walking on it produces no sound. Footsteps make no echo. Even breathing seems quieter here, like as though sound itself has been dampened by the weight of eternity. At the far end sits Osiris. His throne is black, carved from a single piece of obsidian. His skin remains green, but darker now, the green of deep water rather than spring grass. He wears the Atef crown, the white crown of Upper Egypt flanked by two ostrich feathers. In his hands he holds the crook and flail, symbols of kingship and power. But his face shows no pride, no anger, no joy. He has moved beyond such emotions. He is judgment itself now, patient and impartial as stone. The throne rises on a dais of 3 steps. Behind it, hieroglyphs cover the wall from floor to ceiling, not carved but painted in colors that never fade. These symbols tell the story of creation, of order emerging from chaos, of Ma'at establishing itself as the fundamental law of existence. Reading them could take a lifetime. Understanding them could take several. Beside the throne stands Anubis, the jackal-headed god who guided Isis during Osiris's restoration. Anubis has made himself guardian of this realm. He leads souls into the hall. He performs the weighing. He is the last face many see before their fate is decided. In the center of the hall sits the scale. It is enormous, made of gold that never tarnishes. The balance arm extends wide, perfectly level. On one side hangs a plate, on the other, an identical plate. Beneath the scale lurks Amit, the devourer, a creature with the head of a crocodile, the forequarters of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus. She waits, patient and hungry. A soul arrives. It appears translucent at first, barely more than mist. Slowly it solidifies, taking on the form it had in life. The soul looks around, confused. The last thing it remembers is pain, or perhaps a simple fading. Now it stands in this vast hall surrounded by pillars and judges it does not understand. The transition from life to death is not always smooth. Some souls arrive screaming, still caught in the trauma of their final moments. Others come peacefully, having accepted their fate. A few arrive laughing, relieved that whatever struggle defined their existence has finally ended. This particular soul, a woman, middle-aged, a potter by trade, arrives quietly. She died in her sleep, her heart simply stopping between one breath and the next. She had been dreaming of her daughter's wedding. Now she stands in a place that resembles no temple she ever visited. Anubis approaches. His voice is gentle. He explains what will happen. The soul will be judged, its heart will be weighed against Ma'at, truth, balance, cosmic order, represented by a single ostrich feather. If the heart balances with the feather, the soul may pass into the field of reeds, a paradise where wheat grows taller than a man and the Nile never fails to flood. If the heart is heavier, weighted down by wrongdoing, by cruelty, by selfishness, then Amit will devour it. The soul will cease to exist, not suffering, but simply ending, scattered into nothing. The potter's eyes widen. She protests. She was a good woman. She raised her children well. She gave to beggars when she could afford it. She harmed no one intentionally. Surely that counts for something. Anubis says nothing. He leads the soul to the scale. He opens the soul's chest, not with violence, but with a gesture, as though unlatching a door. Inside pulses the heart, glowing softly. He removes it carefully and places it on one plate. On the other plate, he sets the feather of Maat. It is white, pristine, light as air. It seems impossible that something so delicate could balance anything, yet it sits there waiting. The scale does not move immediately. There is a pause, a moment of stillness so complete that even the space between heartbeats feels loud. Then the arm begins to shift. Sometimes the plates balance perfectly. The heart and feather align, level and true. In these moments, the hall seems to brighten. The 42 judges nod in approval. Osiris raises his crook slightly, a gesture of blessing. Anubis removes the heart and returns it to the soul. The soul's form solidifies further, becoming vibrant and whole. Anubis guides it to a door that opens in the far wall, revealing fields of green stretching to the horizon. The soul steps through, and the door closes behind it. The potter's heart balances. She gasps as the scale holds steady. The feather does not rise. Her heart does not sink. They rest there, equal, perfect. She lived an ordinary life. She was not a hero. She performed no great deeds, but she was kind when kindness was possible. She told the truth even when lies would have been easier. She forgave her husband's small cruelties. She shared her food with her neighbor during a bad season. She comforted her friend whose child had died. These acts, individually small, accumulated. They lightened her heart gram by gram until it weighed no more than a feather. The door opens. Beyond it, she sees fields more beautiful than any she knew in life. The wheat does grow taller than a man, just as promised. The sky is perfectly blue. Somewhere in the distance she hears laughter. Her daughter's laughter. Her mother's. Voices of those she loved who passed before her. She steps through, the door closes. The hall returns to its patient waiting. Other times the heart sinks. Weighted by lies, by violence done, by love withheld when it could have been given, the plate descends. The feather rises, the imbalance is clear. Amit moves forward. There is no malice in her. She is simply performing her function, the same way a fire burns or water flows downhill. She opens her crocodile jaws and swallows the heart in one motion. The soul cries out once, then dissipates. It does not scream forever. It does not suffer. It simply stops being. The hall returns to silence. Osiris watches each judgment. He does not intervene. This is not cruelty, but necessity. The universe requires balance. Actions have weight. Every choice made in life accumulates, building the heart gram by gram. There is no lying to the scale. It sees through excuses, through rationalizations, through all the stories people tell themselves to justify their actions. Souls continue to arrive, one after another, an endless procession. Each believes itself unique. Each thinks its case deserves special consideration. But the scale cares nothing for circumstances. It measures only truth. A merchant arrives, a man who spent his life accumulating wealth. He argues that he fed his family, that he donated to temples, that he followed the rituals. Anubis places his heart on the scale. It drops heavily. The man had cheated his customers, shorted weights, sold spoiled grain to the poor while keeping the best for himself. His donations were not generosity, but bargaining, an attempt to buy divine favor. The feather rises. Amit comes forward. A woman arrives next. She was a slave, beaten often, given little. She speaks no defense because she expects none. She lived and suffered and died. That was her existence. Anubis weighs her heart. It balances. Despite her suffering, she harmed no one. She endured with patience. She helped other slaves when she could, sharing her meager food, comforting those who wept. The judges nod. Osiris gestures toward the door. She walks through, and for the first time in her existence, she feels joy. A soldier comes. He followed orders. He fought in wars he did not start. He ended lives because his king commanded it. His heart is complex, layers of guilt and duty intertwined. The scale trembles, unable to decide. Osiris leans forward slightly. He examines the soul more closely. Did the soldier enjoy the violence? Did he go beyond his orders to inflict unnecessary pain? Or did he act only as required, taking no pleasure in death? The soldier stands rigid, as he always stood. Even in death, discipline defines him. He does not plead. He does not make excuses. He simply waits for judgment, as he waited for orders throughout his life. His heart rests on the scale. It is heavy, yes. Each life he took added weight. Each village burned, each enemy struck down, each moment of violence, all of it accumulated. But there is more to examine. Did he show mercy when possible? Did he protect the weak within his own ranks? Did he carry a dying enemy to water, even though that enemy had tried to end him moments before? The scale hesitates. Back and forth, the arm shifts by fractions. The soldier watches, barely breathing. Anubis waits, patient as always. The 42 judges lean forward slightly, interested in this case. Finally, the scale settles. The plates balance. Barely, but enough. The soldier is granted passage. He leaves, shoulders sagging with relief he thought he would never feel. As he passes through the door, he sees his fallen companions waiting for him in the fields beyond. They call his name. They wave. He breaks into a run, something he never allowed himself to do in life. Discipline no longer matters. The war is over. He is home. Time in the Hall of Two Truths does not move as it does in the living world. A judgment might take seconds or years. There is no rush, no need for efficiency. Each soul receives the attention it deserves. Each case is considered fully. Between judgments, the hall rests in silence. The pillars breathe. Osiris sits motionless on his throne. Anubis cleanses the scale, ensuring it remains perfectly calibrated. Amit settles back on her haunches, waiting. The silence in the hall is not empty. It carries weight, substance. It is the silence of deep water, of vast distances, of time stretching in all directions without end. Within that silence, thoughts can be heard more clearly than in any busy market or crowded temple. Within that silence, truth reveals itself. Anubis performs his maintenance with ritualistic precision. He examines the balance arm for any warping. He checks the plates for scratches or dents. He polishes the gold until it gleams, though there is no one to impress with its beauty. This is not vanity, but necessity. The scale must be perfect. Even the smallest imperfection could throw off a judgment, could send a soul to the wrong destination. Amit waits with the patience of predators everywhere. She does not hunger in the way living creatures hunger. She is not cruel. She is simply what she is, the end of those who fail the test. When she devours a heart, she does so without emotion. It is her function, her purpose, the reason she exists. The 42 judges stand silent along their pillars. Each represents a specific sin: theft, adultery, pride, cruelty to animals, blasphemy against the gods. When a soul enters, each judge examines that soul for their particular transgression. A thief will face the judge of theft. A liar will face the judge of lies. None escape scrutiny. This is Osiris's existence now. He does not sleep. He does not eat. He does not feel loneliness, though Isis is far away in the world above. He has moved beyond such needs. He has become a function, a necessary part of the cosmic machinery. Yet something of his former self remains. When a soul passes through, when the scale balances and the door opens, there is the faintest flicker in his eyes. Not quite happiness, but something close. A recognition that another has made it, that another soul will know peace. And when a soul fails, when Amit devours and the hall empties again, there is the slightest tightening around his mouth. Not quite sorrow, but its echo. He remembers what it was to live. He remembers the Nile at dawn, Isis beside him, the laughter of his people. He remembers betrayal and darkness, the feeling of drowning in lead and cedar. He remembers being torn apart and pieced back together. These memories do not torment him. They simply exist within him, like old scars that ache when the weather changes. Above, in the world of sunlight and breath, people tell his story. They paint it on tomb walls. They carve it into stone. They whisper it to children at bedtime. Some versions are accurate. Others drift into exaggeration or misunderstanding. Osiris does not concern himself with how he is remembered. Memory is for the living. He has other work. Another soul arrives. Anubis guides it forward. The cycle continues. The scale awaits. The feather rests lightly on its plate, white and pure and impossibly light. The heart is placed. The balance begins its slow deliberation. And Osiris watches, green and patient and eternal, as he will watch for as long as souls need judging, for as long as the universe requires balance. The Nile still floods each year, far above in the land of the living. Farmers still plant seeds in the rich silt. Wheat still grows. Children still laugh. The cycle of life continues, death folded into it as naturally as night follows day. Osiris brought order once to that world. Now he brings order to this one. He is the king of endings that are also beginnings. He is the promise that nothing is lost, only transformed. Isis visits sometimes. She can traverse realms in ways most cannot. She descends through hidden passages, through gates that open only for her. She sits beside his throne for a time. They do not speak much. There is little to say that has not already been said. But her presence reminds him of warmth, of love that persists even across the boundary between life and death. She brings news of Horus, their son. The boy grows strong. One day soon, he will challenge Set. He will reclaim the throne. He will restore Ma'at to Egypt. Osiris listens and nods. This is as it should be. The world needs its king, and he is no longer that king. When Isis visits, she brings with her the scent of the living world. Lotus blossoms, river water, fresh bread baking. These scents seem out of place in the hall, yet they do not disturb its atmosphere. They simply exist alongside the timelessness, a reminder that life continues, that the cycle persists. She tells him about the harvest, about festivals celebrated in his name, about children born and named after him. She speaks of the Nile's flooding, how it came exactly when expected, how the fields grew green and fertile. She describes sunsets he will never see again, stars wheeling through skies he no longer walks beneath. Osiris listens. He does not feel regret. Regret implies wanting something different, and he has moved beyond wanting. But he remembers. Memory and longing are not the same. He can remember the warmth of sunlight without needing to feel it again. He can remember Isis's laughter without aching for its return. Sometimes she reaches out and touches his hand where it rests on the throne's arm. Her fingers are warm. His are cool, the temperature of stone that has never known sun. The contrast does not trouble either of them. They have accepted what they are now, connected but separate, loving across a distance that cannot be bridged except in moments like these. When Isis leaves, the hall feels emptier for a moment. Then another soul arrives, and Osiris returns his attention to the work at hand. A young man approaches, barely past childhood. He died of fever, sweating and shaking, calling for his mother. Now he stands before the scale, terrified. He has heard stories of judgment, of Amit the devourer. He is certain he will fail. He was not perfect in life. He stole bread once when hungry. He lied to his father about breaking a tool. He envied his neighbor's donkey. Anubis guides him forward gently. The boy trembles. His heart is placed on the scale. It rises immediately, light as air, lighter even than the feather. The boy lived only 15 years. He had little time to accumulate weight. His sins were those of a child, minor, forgivable, the stumbles of someone still learning to walk through the world. The feather sinks, the heart floats, the balance tips heavily in the boy's favor. He stares, unable to believe what he sees. Anubis smiles, a rare expression on his usually solemn face. The judges nod. Osiris gestures toward the door. The boy runs through it, and beyond he hears his mother calling. She died years before him. She has been waiting. Another soul arrives. An old woman this time, bent and weathered. She lived 90 years. She saw dynasties rise and fall. She buried 3 husbands, 7 children, countless grandchildren. She endured more grief than most people experience in several lifetimes. Her heart is heavy with sorrow, but sorrow and sin are not the same. Grief adds weight, but not the kind that condemns. The scale knows the difference between a heart heavy with sadness and a heart heavy with cruelty. Her heart settles on the plate. The feather rests on the other side. They balance. She has earned her rest. She has earned peace. She walks through the door without looking back. She has looked back enough in her life. Now she moves forward into a place where looking back is no longer necessary. The procession continues. Souls of all kinds, farmers and nobles, priests and beggars, warriors and merchants, mothers and children. Each comes with a lifetime of choices wrapped into the muscle of their heart. Each faces the scale's judgment. Some judgments are swift, others take time. The scale considers carefully. It weighs not just actions, but intentions. It measures not just what was done, but why. A theft committed to feed a starving child weighs differently than a theft committed from greed. A lie told to protect someone weighs differently than a lie told to cause harm. The scale knows. It always knows. A priest arrives dressed in the fine linen of his office. He led rituals for decades. He spoke prayers over the sick. He blessed marriages and mourned the dead. By all appearances, he was holy. His heart hits the plate with unexpected weight. It sinks immediately. The feather rises. The imbalance is stark. The priest protests. He served the gods faithfully. He never missed a ritual. He memorized every prayer. Surely that counts. But Osiris sees deeper. The priest performed rituals for status, not devotion. He judged others harshly while excusing his own failings. He used his position to extract favors from those who could not refuse. He spoke words of compassion but felt none. His heart, for all its religious trappings, remained cold and selfish. Amit approaches. The priest screams. He begs for mercy. But mercy is not Osiris's domain. Justice is. Balance is. The natural consequence of choices made. Amit devours the heart. The priest's form flickers and fades. The hall returns to silence. A prostitute arrives next. She died young, worn out by a hard life. She never attended temple. She never learned prayers. By the standards of proper society, she was sinful, shameful, unworthy. Her heart is placed on the scale. It balances perfectly with the feather. She lived with kindness despite her circumstances. She comforted men who were lonely, listened to their troubles, made them feel seen even if only for an hour. She gave half her earnings to her younger sister so the girl could avoid the same life. She never judged others for their situations. She understood that survival sometimes requires compromise. The door opens for her. She walks through, surprised, grateful, finally free from the weight of others' judgment. Time passes, though time in the hall does not pass as it does elsewhere. Minutes might be years. Years might be moments. Measurement loses meaning when eternity is your only frame of reference. Osiris sits and judges, soul after soul, heart after heart. Some pass, some fail. The cycle continues. He thinks sometimes about his own judgment long ago when he first arrived here. Who weighed his heart? He cannot remember. Perhaps it happened too fast. Perhaps he was too disoriented from resurrection and death to notice. Or perhaps, having been torn apart and reassembled, having suffered betrayal and loss, his heart had been purified by the process. Suffering does not excuse wrongdoing, but it can burn away the dross, leaving only what is essential. He was not a perfect king. He made mistakes. He trusted too freely. He failed to see Set's resentment until too late, but he ruled with love for his people. He sought balance. He tried to create a world where life could flourish. Whatever weight his heart carried was apparently not enough to tip the scales against him. Now he sits in judgment of others, and he does so without pride or superiority. He knows how easy it is to fail. He knows how small choices accumulate into destinies. He knows that everyone arrives at the scale believing they deserve passage, and sometimes they are right, and sometimes they are tragically wrong. The pillars continue their slow breathing. The light continues its sourceless illumination. The silence continues its patient waiting. Another soul arrives. The cycle repeats. Anubis guides them forward. The heart is weighed. The judgment is rendered. The soul either passes through the door or ceases to exist. This is the pattern. This is the rhythm. This is the eternal truth that Osiris embodies now. That every life will be measured, that every choice matters, that balance must be maintained, even if it means difficult truths must be faced. Above, in the world of sunlight and breath, people tell his story. They paint it on tomb walls. They carve it into stone. They whisper it to children at bedtime. They tell of the Green King who brought life to Egypt. They tell of betrayal and dismemberment. They tell of Isis's devotion and the long search. They tell of resurrection and transformation. They tell of the Hall of Two Truths, where hearts are weighed against a feather. Some versions are accurate. Others drift into exaggeration or misunderstanding. Osiris does not concern himself with how he is remembered. Memory is for the living. He has other work. The work never ends. There is no final soul, no last judgment, no completion of the task. As long as life exists, death will follow. As long as people make choices, those choices will need weighing. As long as hearts beat, eventually they will arrive here to be measured. Osiris has accepted this. He does not count the judgments. He does not track the centuries. He simply sits and waits for the next arrival, ready to provide what every soul needs, a fair hearing, an honest assessment, the truth of their own existence reflected back at them without distortion or mercy or cruelty, just pure truth. The scale stands ready. The feather rests lightly. Amit waits below, patient and purposeful. The Hall of Two Truths exists outside all time, beyond all space, eternal and unchanging. And at its center, green as growing things, patient as the river, sits Osiris, the god who died and returned, the king who rules where no one wishes to go but everyone must. The judge who understands both failure and redemption because he has known both himself. His story is not tragic, it is transformation. Betrayal led to death, death led to resurrection. Resurrection led to a new purpose. Every ending became a beginning. Every loss revealed something essential. The Green King still reigns, just not where the sun shines. He reigns in the space between breaths, in the moment when life becomes memory, in the threshold that everyone crosses alone. The Nile still floods above, far in the world of the living. Seeds still push through soil. Children still laugh. The cycle of life and growth and harvest continues, eternal and reassuring. And here, in this place, outside places, Osiris maintains the other side of that cycle. Death is not the opposite of life, but its completion. The harvest requires both planting and reaping. The story requires both beginning and ending. He is the ending that promises meaning. He is the judge who proves that choices matter. He is the balance that keeps the universe from tipping into chaos. Another soul materializes in the hall, confused and frightened, looking around for answers. Anubis approaches, gentle as always, to explain what comes next. The scale awaits. The feather rests. The judgment begins again. Forever and always, as long as hearts beat and choices are made and lives are lived, the Hall of Two Truths will stand, and Osiris will sit his black throne, green and patient and eternal, weighing what needs weighing, judging what needs judging, maintaining the balance that allows the universe to continue. This is his gift to the world. The promise that nothing is forgotten, that every life has value enough to be measured, that the scale exists and functions fairly, that truth wins in the end, even if lies flourish for a time in the living world. The stars wheel overhead in skies that are not quite skies. Time moves forward in the world above while standing still in the hall below. Isis walks among her people, teaching them, guiding them, preparing Horus for the day he will reclaim his father's throne. But that is a different story. That belongs to the living. This story belongs to the threshold. to the moment of transformation, to the place where all journeys end and for some begin again. The hall stands eternal. The scale balances, the feather waits, and Osiris, green king, betrayed brother, resurrected god, judge of the dead, continues his vigil, patient as the stones, lasting as the river, necessary as breath itself. The silence deepens. Another soul arrives. The work continues, forever. Story 2. The night Ra fought the serpent. The sun's descent. The sun moves across the sky, each day the same path, each evening the same descent. Ra sits upon his golden bark. The boat glides through the air as if sailing on water. Around him stand the gods who travel with him, Thoth with his ibis head, Sia who holds wisdom, who speaks the words of power. They do not speak much now. The day's work is done. The western horizon waits. Beyond it lies the Duat, the realm beneath the world, the place where night keeps its secrets. Light fades slowly. Gold becomes amber. Amber softens to rose. The Nile below reflects these changes, a mirror of copper and flame. Farmers finish their work in the fields. They look up at the dimming sky and offer quiet words of thanks. Children are called inside. Doors close against the coming dark. Ra feels the weight of the day leaving him. His light has nourished the world. His warmth has ripened grain and opened flowers. But now he must rest. More than rest, he must journey. The night holds a task that never ends. The bark reaches the edge. The sky deepens from rose to purple. Stars begin their silent watch, one by one appearing like distant fires. The first gate of the Duat opens before him. It is made of stone older than memory, covered in symbols that shift and breathe. The passage draws him in. Darkness wraps around the boat. Not the soft darkness of a moonless night, but something deeper. The air changes. It becomes cool and still. The sound of the world above fades away. Even the wind goes quiet. This is the descent. This is the beginning. The walls of the passage glow faintly with their own light. Hieroglyphs line the stone, telling stories of those who came before. Some are prayers. Some are warnings. Ra has seen them countless times, yet they never lose their strangeness. The language is old, older than the pyramids, older than the first dynasty. It speaks of when gods and mortals lived closer together, when the boundary between worlds was thin as papyrus. The bark moves forward, guided by currents that do not exist in the world above. The crew remains silent. They know what lies ahead. They have fought this battle every night since time began. Hours pass, or perhaps only moments. Time does not flow the same way here. The Duat stretches in all directions, vast beyond measure. Caverns open into other caverns. Rivers of shadow wind through spaces between spaces. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of water dripping echoes endlessly. Ra's light dims as he descends, not extinguished but contained. He glows now like a lamp turned low, enough to see by, enough to guide the way. The souls of the dead line the shores of this underworld river. They watch him pass. Some reach out, hoping for his blessing. Others turn away, lost in their own memories. The first hour of night passes. The bark enters a cavern so large its ceiling cannot be seen. Pillars of stone rise from the floor, carved with faces of forgotten gods. Their eyes seem to follow the boat as it glides by. The air here tastes of copper and dust. A figure appears on the shore. Tall and thin, wrapped in linen that was white once but has yellowed with age. One of the dead who guards this realm. The figure bows as Ra passes. The god acknowledges with a slight nod. This is not his kingdom. Here, Osiris rules. Ra is merely passing through. The second hour begins. The passage narrows. The walls close in on either side. The crew must guide the bark carefully now. One wrong turn and they could become lost in the maze of corridors that branch off in all directions. But they know the way. They have traveled it since the first sunset. Thoth steps forward. He raises his staff and speaks words in the old tongue, the language of creation, the sounds that shape the world from chaos. The walls respond. They shift slightly, opening a path that was not there before. The bark continues. The third hour brings them to the lake of fire. It is not truly fire, but water that glows red and orange, giving off heat like burning coals. Steam rises in lazy spirals. The souls who have failed Mot's judgment are said to swim here, purifying themselves through endless ages. Ra does not look at them. Their suffering is not his concern tonight. The fourth hour, the air grows colder. Ice begins to form on the edges of the bark. This is the realm of absence, where warmth and light are forgotten concepts. The crew huddles closer to Ra, drawing what comfort they can from his presence. He shares his remaining light with them, though it costs him strength. A shape moves in the darkness ahead. Large, patient, waiting. The fifth hour approaches. The moment between midnight and dawn when the world holds its breath. This is when the serpent comes. The serpent of night. The water ahead begins to move, not the gentle flow of a current, but something deliberate, purposeful. Waves form where there should be stillness. The surface ripples and breaks. Apophis rises from the depths. The serpent is vast. His body stretches back into darkness, coils upon coils disappearing into the black water. His scales are the color of storm clouds, dark gray and deep purple, each one the size of a shield. They overlap in patterns that hurt to look at too long, geometry that does not quite make sense. His head emerges. It is broader than the bark is long. Eyes like burning coal pits regard Ra with ancient hatred. Not the hot anger of Set, but something colder. The resentment of chaos toward order, the fury of night at being pushed aside each dawn. The serpent does not speak. He has no need for words. His purpose is absolute. He exists to devour the sun, to end the cycle, to bring permanent darkness to the world above. Ra stands at the prow of the bark. He does not draw a weapon. He does not shout challenges. He simply waits, his light growing brighter now, pushing back against the dark. The crew begins their work. This is why they are here. This is the task they were born to perform. Thoth raises his staff. His voice fills the cavern, speaking spells of binding and protection. The words are sharp and clear, cutting through the heavy air. Each syllable carries weight, pressing against the serpent's advance. Sia steps forward next. She speaks of wisdom, of the order that holds the cosmos together. Her words are quieter than Thoth's, but they run deeper. They remind the darkness that it is not all there is, that light has its place, that balance must be maintained. Who follows? His words are pure authority, commands that reality itself must obey. He does not ask the serpent to retreat. He tells existence to remember its structure, to recall the laws that were set down when the first sun rose. But Apophis is not easily deterred. He has heard these spells before. Every night, the same words. Every night, the same struggle. He knows them as well as the gods who speak them. The serpent strikes. His head lunges forward, jaws opening wide enough to swallow the bark whole. Inside his mouth, darkness absolute. The kind of darkness that existed before creation, before the first word was spoken, before anything was anything. Ra's light flares, brilliant and sudden. It fills the cavern like lightning. The serpent recoils, blinded. His jaws snap shut on empty air. The sound echoes for what seems like minutes. The bark rocks from the force of the serpent's movement. Water splashes over the sides. The crew holds steady. They have ridden out worse. Apophis circles now, keeping his distance. He is patient. He has all night. Eventually, Ra's light will dim again. It always does. The sun must conserve his strength for the dawn. That is when Apophis will strike again. Set appears on the prow beside Ra, the red god, the storm lord, the one who walks between order and chaos. In the world above, Set is often cast as villain, brother who betrayed Osiris, god of confusion and violence. But here, in the darkness, he is defender. He alone among the gods understands chaos well enough to fight it. Set holds a spear, long and cruel, forged from metals that do not exist in the mortal world. He does not wait for the serpent to attack again. He leaps from the bark, landing on Apophis's scaled back. The serpent writhes, his body thrashes, sending waves crashing against the cavern walls. Set drives his spear down, finding the spaces between scales. Dark ichor flows. Not blood, exactly. Something older. The substance of undoing. Apophis twists, trying to throw the god off. Set holds tight, one hand gripping a ridge of scales, the other stabbing again and again. Each wound closes almost as quickly as it opens. The serpent is not mortal. He cannot be ended, only driven back. Ra watches from the bark. He knows Set can only buy time. The true battle is not physical. It is something else, something that happens on a level beyond flesh and form. The serpent's eyes find Ra again. They lock. In that moment, silence falls. Even Set pauses in his assault. This is the real struggle. Will and will, order and chaos. The sun's determination to rise again against the serpent's need to prevent it. Both absolute, both unyielding. The gods on the bark resume their chanting. Their voices blend together now, becoming one sound, a sustained note that reverberates through the duat. It is not beautiful, Beauty is not the point. It is strong. It is constant. It is the sound of refusal. We will not yield. We will not fall. We will rise again. The light around Ra grows, not brighter in the way of noon sun, deeper, more fundamental. The light that existed before the world took shape, before there were names for things, before separation into sky and earth, day and night. Apophis feels it, the ancient power, the primal force that pushed back the darkness at creation dawn. He knows he cannot overcome it. Not tonight, not ever. But still he tries. He must. It is his nature. The serpent strikes once more. His jaws close around the front of the bark. Wood splinters. The boat lurches. For a moment it seems the sun might be swallowed after all. Set roars. He drives his spear deep into the serpent's jaw. The weapon pierces through, emerging from the other side. Apophis's jaws spring open. The bark slides free. Ra speaks now. The first words he has uttered since entering the duet. They are simple. They are absolute. Back. Just one word, but it carries the weight of a million suns, the force of every dawn that has ever been, every dawn that will ever be. Apophis retreats, not defeated, never defeated, but driven back into the depths. His eyes remain fixed on Ra until the water closes over him. The promise is clear. Tomorrow night, the same battle, the same struggle. The water calms, the waves settle, the cavern falls silent except for the quiet breathing of the gods. Set returns to the bark, his form covered in the dark ichor. It steams and hisses where it touches the boat, but does no lasting harm. He nods to Ra. No words pass between them. None are needed. The crew resumes their positions. Thoth guides the bark forward once more. The passage continues. There are still hours before dawn, still gates to pass through, still trials to face. But the worst is behind them. The serpent will not return tonight. He has been driven back to his depths, where he will coil around himself and nurse his wounds and plan for tomorrow's battle. The sixth hour begins. The walls here are carved with scenes of victory. Past pharaohs standing over defeated enemies. Gods casting down demons. The images are faded with age, but still visible in Ra's light. They serve as reminder. Chaos has risen before. It will rise again. But order endures. The seventh hour brings them to the Hall of Judgment. Osiris sits upon his throne here, presiding over the dead. The scales of Ma'at stand before him, weighing hearts against the feather of truth. Ra pauses to speak with his fellow god. They exchange news of the night's battle. Osiris nods gravely. He understands the burden. His own realm is constantly under threat from chaos. Order must be defended every moment. The eighth hour. The passage begins to rise now. The air grows warmer. Somewhere far above, the eastern horizon is still dark, but preparing, waiting. The ninth hour. The crew can feel it now. The pull of dawn, the call of the world above. They begin to smile, these gods who have fought through darkness. They know they will succeed. They always do. The 10th hour. The walls start to glow with their own light now. Not borrowed from Ra, but natural. The stone remembers the sun. It knows morning is coming. The 11th hour. The final gate appears. It is made of gold and lapis lazuli, inlaid with precious stones that catch Ra's light and throw it back multiplied. The gate swings open slowly. Beyond it, the first hint of gray in the eastern sky. The 12th hour approaches. The moment of transition, night preparing to surrender to day, darkness stepping aside for light. The dawn renewed. The bark emerges from the duat. The sensation is immediate. The heavy stillness of the underworld falls away. Air flows again. The distant sound of birds beginning their morning songs drifts across the water. Ra stands at the prow, facing east. His light begins to strengthen now. No longer the contained glow of the night journey. He is preparing to become the full sun once more, the disk that brings life to the world. The horizon holds that perfect moment between night and day. Not dark, not light, both and neither. The sky is deep blue, shading to gray, touched with the first hints of gold at its edge. The stars fade one by one, reluctant to leave but unable to remain in the presence of what is coming. They will return tonight as they always do. For now, they surrender the sky. The Nile below reflects the changing light. Silver first, then bronze, then copper as the sun strengthens. The water moves gently, eternal and patient. It has seen millions of dawns. It will see millions more. On the shore, the first priests emerge from the temples. They face east and begin their morning prayers. Their voices rise in harmony, welcoming Ra's return, praising his strength, thanking him for his victory over darkness. They do not know the details of his battle. They have never seen Apophis. They do not understand the true nature of the struggle that happens each night, but they sense it. Deep in their bones, they know that dawn is not automatic, that it must be fought for, that chaos waits always just beyond the light. Ra appreciates their prayers, not because he needs them. The sun would rise with or without mortal acknowledgement, but they remind him why the struggle matters. These small beings, with their brief lives and their constant striving, they are part of what he protects, part of what makes order worth defending. The bark continues its ascent, rising now not just across the sky, but through it, moving from the realm where earth and heaven touch into the pure blue above. The crew begins to relax. Thoth returns his staff to its resting place. Sia and Hu sit down, their work complete for now. Set remains standing at the prow, looking back toward the west, toward the duat, toward the darkness they have left behind. He knows it is not truly gone, only waiting. But that is a concern for later. For now, they have won, as they always do, as they must. The sun breaks over the horizon. The moment arrives suddenly, though it has been building for hours. One instant the edge of the world is dark, the next a point of brilliant light, then a sliver, then a curve, then the full disk, blazing and magnificent. Light floods across the land. It touches the pyramids first, turning their limestone faces gold. It flows across the temples, waking the painted walls to color. It spreads through the streets of the cities, chasing away the last shadows. It reaches the fields where farmers are already at work, and they pause to feel its warmth on their faces. Children wake. Market vendors begin setting out their goods, fishermen cast their nets, scribes prepare their papyrus. Life resumes in countless small ways, each one made possible by the sun's return. Ra feels the weight of his responsibility settle onto him again. The night's rest, such as it was, is over. Now begins the day's work. The endless task of bringing light and warmth to the world, of maintaining order against the forces that would undo it. But he does not resent this burden. He never has. This is his purpose, his nature. He is the sun. He brings dawn. That is simply what he is. The bark continues its journey across the sky. By mid-morning, it will be directly overhead and Ra's power will be at its peak. By afternoon, the descent will begin again. By evening, he will once more approach the western horizon and the gates of the duat. And when night falls, Apophis will be waiting. The serpent always waits, coiled in the depths, nursing his wounds from the previous battle, gathering his strength for the next. He has never succeeded in devouring the sun. In all the countless nights since the world began, he has never managed to prevent the dawn, but he will try again tonight, and the night after, and the night after that. He has no choice. It is his nature, just as rising is Ra's nature. Order and chaos locked in eternal struggle. Neither can exist without the other. Neither can triumph completely. This is the secret at the heart of the world. The truth that the priests sense but cannot quite articulate. Balance is not a state that is achieved and then maintained easily. It is a constant effort, a battle fought every day, every night, every moment. Chaos will always rise, order must always defend, and the cycle continues, endless and necessary. Ra understands this in a way that mortals cannot. He does not see the struggle as futile simply because it never ends. The point is not to win forever. The point is to keep fighting, to ensure that each day follows each night, that life continues, that the Nile floods and crops grow and children are born. The serpent is not evil, exactly. Evil implies choice. Apophis has no choice. He is chaos made manifest. He is the force that existed before creation and that will exist after the end. He is what Ra pushes against to define the boundaries of order. In some strange way, they need each other. Ra's light means nothing without darkness to contrast it. Apophis's chaos has no meaning without order to threaten. They are opposite ends of the same reality, two faces of existence. But this understanding does not make the battle any less real, does not make the danger any less pressing. Each night, there is a genuine possibility that the sun might not return, that chaos might, this once, finally overcome order, that darkness might be permanent. It is Ra's will and the will of those who travel with him that prevents this. Their determination, their refusal to yield. The morning advances, the sun climbs higher, the world below goes about its business, mostly unaware of the drama that plays out above and below. Some look up and offer thanks. Most simply go about their tasks, accepting the light as they accept the air they breathe. as given, as constant. Only a few understand how fragile this constancy is, how it must be renewed each day, how close the world comes each night to ending. The priests understand. They keep the knowledge alive through their rituals and prayers, through the stories carved on temple walls, through the hymns sung at dawn and dusk. The pharaoh understands. He is Ra's representative on earth. His role is to maintain Ma'at, to keep order in the human realm, just as Ra keeps it in the cosmic realm. The battles are different in scale but identical in principle. The dead understand. Those who have passed through Osiris's judgment and wait in the Duat. They see Ra's boat pass each night. They witness the battle with Apophis. They know that their existence in the afterlife depends on the sun's victory. If chaos prevails, the carefully maintained order of the underworld will collapse. The dead will cease to exist in any meaningful way. Everyone has a stake in Ra's daily victory. Every living thing, every dead thing, every god. The entire structure of existence depends on that golden bark completing its journey, on the sun emerging from the Duat each dawn. And it does. Day after day, year after year, dynasty after dynasty, the sun rises, the light returns, order prevails. But only because the battle is fought, only because Ra and his crew face the serpent each night, only because Set drives his spear into chaos's flesh, only because the words of power are spoken, only because the will to continue never falters. The sun reaches its zenith. Noon arrives. Ra pauses here at the highest point of his journey and looks down at the world he protects. The green ribbon of the Nile cutting through golden desert. The cities clustered along its banks. The temples rising toward the sky. The people, tiny from this height, going about their lives. He sees a farmer guiding his ox through a field, a mother nursing her child in the shade, a boy running with a wooden hoop, a priest purifying himself in sacred water, a scribe recording grain deliveries, a soldier standing watch, a merchant arguing prices. Life, in all its messy, beautiful, complicated forms. This is what the nightly battle protects. This is what makes the struggle worthwhile. Chaos would erase all of this, not out of malice, simply because chaos is absence of form. It cannot allow structure to persist. It must try to return everything to the undifferentiated state that existed before creation. Order imposes form, makes distinctions, allows for separate things, a river and the land beside it, a mother and her child, past and future, life and death. All these concepts require boundaries, definitions, structure. This is what Ra brings. This is what the sun means. Not just light and warmth, though those matter, but the fundamental principle that there can be different things, that existence can have shape and meaning. The afternoon begins. The sun starts its descent. Ra turns his face westward, toward evening, toward the gates of the Duat, toward another night, another battle. He is tired. The day's work has drained him, as it always does, maintaining his light for hours on end, providing warmth for the entire world. It takes effort, it costs strength, but he cannot rest. Not truly. Even in the Duat, even while battling Apophis, he must keep a portion of his light burning, must ensure that the boat can navigate, that his crew can see, that the path to morning remains visible. Set stands beside him again. The red god never seems to tire. Perhaps chaos grants him energy that order cannot provide, or perhaps he simply hides his exhaustion better. Tonight will be the same, Set says. It is not a question. Yes, Ra replies. It is always the same. Does that not burden you? The endless repetition? Ra considers this. Would you prefer that it change? That Apophis succeed? Set smiles. It is not a pleasant expression. No. I enjoy the fight too much. I only wonder if you do. Enjoyment is not required, only necessity. Spoken like a true embodiment of order. They fall silent. The sun continues its descent. The shadows grow longer. The light takes on that particular quality of late afternoon, golden and nostalgic, the day preparing to surrender to evening. The people below finish their work. Fields are left until tomorrow. Shops close. Families gather for evening meals. The world begins to quiet, preparing for night's arrival. Soon the priests will perform the sunset rituals. They will chant the prayers that accompany Ra into the Duat. They will ask for his protection through the dark hours. They will express faith that dawn will come again, and it will, because Ra will fight for it. Because Set will drive his spear into the serpent's flesh. Because Thoth will speak the words of power. Because the crew will hold steady no matter how the bark rocks. This is the promise, unspoken but absolute. As long as the gods endure, as long as will remains, the sun will rise. The western horizon approaches. The sky begins its evening transformation. Gold fading to orange, orange deepening to red, red softening to purple. The first stars appear, tentative, testing to see if they are allowed to shine yet. The answer is yes. Night is almost here. Ra reaches the edge. The gates of the Duat open before him. The darkness welcomes him back. Not warmly, never warmly, but inevitably. This is where he must go. This is the price of dawn. The bark enters the passage. The cool stillness wraps around him once more. The world above fades. The underworld receives him. And somewhere in the depths, Apophis stirs. The serpent opens his eyes. He feels the sun's presence returning. He uncoils his massive form. He begins to swim toward the place where they will meet. The battle will begin again. The same battle, the same struggle. Order against chaos, light against darkness, rising against falling. Ra settles into his place at the prow. He dims his light to conserve strength. He prepares himself for what is coming, for what always comes. The crew takes their positions. They have done this countless times. They will do it countless times more, as long as the world endures, as long as there's a difference between night and day. The bark moves deeper, deeper into the duat. The hours pass, the time approaches when the serpent will rise, but that is simply how it is, how it must be. The nature of existence requires this struggle, requires that order be defended, that chaos be driven back. Not once, not finally, but again and again, forever. Ra does not resent this. He accepts it. As the mountain accepts the wind, as the river accepts its banks, as the sun accepts its path across the sky. This is what he is. This is what he does. He brings the dawn. No matter what waits in the darkness, no matter how many times he must face it, the dawn will come. Not because it is easy, not because it is certain, but because he wills it, because the gods will fight for it, because order, however fragile, however constantly threatened, is worth defending. The night deepens. The battle approaches, and Ra, the eternal sun, prepares to face chaos once more, as he always has, as he always will, until the end of all things. The whisper of the unfinished tomb. The pharaoh who dreamed of forever. The desert remembers everything. Wind carves stories into stone, sand buries cities, then reveals them again. In this place of endless horizons, one king stood beneath the stars and made a promise to himself. He would not fade. He would not become dust scattered across dunes. His name would echo through eternity. The pharaoh's name has been lost to time. Perhaps that is the first irony. But in his moment, in his golden age, he ruled with absolute conviction. The Nile flooded each year, bringing life to the valley. Crops grew tall, people prospered. Yet prosperity brought him no comfort. Each sunset reminded him of his own approaching darkness. He watched his father's tomb from the palace window. The structure stood against the western cliffs, painted in ochre and shadow. Workers had labored for decades on that monument. When his father died, priests sealed the entrance with ceremony and incense. Now jackals roamed near the base. Wind wore away the painted hieroglyphs. Even the grandest tombs yielded to time. The young pharaoh decided his tomb would be different. Beyond different. It would be a temple to permanence itself. He called his architects to the throne room on a morning when light streamed through high windows, turning the air to gold dust. The chief architect was an older man named Amenhotep. His hands were calloused from decades of work. His eyes held the patient wisdom of someone who had built many monuments and watched many dreams crumble. He bowed low before his king. The pharaoh spoke of his vision, a tomb carved deep into the living rock, chambers within chambers, each more sacred than the last, walls covered in spells and prayers, every word a shield against oblivion. The burial chamber would rest at the heart of a maze, protected by secret doors and false passages. No thief would ever find his body. No decay would ever touch his name. Amenhotep listened. He had heard such dreams before. Every pharaoh believed his tomb would transcend time. Every pharaoh commissioned works of impossible scale. Yet the desert always won. Sand buried everything eventually. Still, he bowed again and promised to design the greatest tomb ever conceived. Work began at the next new moon. The site chosen was remote, far from the royal valley where other pharaohs rested. This tomb would stand alone, carved into a cliff face that glowed red at sunset. The location felt ancient, touched by something older than kingdoms. On the first day, workers arrived before dawn. They came from villages up and down the Nile, men who knew stone and chisel, who could read the language of rock. They carried copper tools that caught the early light. Their foreman blessed the ground with water from the sacred river. The first strike of chisel against stone rang out clear and sharp. Then another. Then a chorus of tapping that would continue for years. The sound became the heartbeat of the desert, steady and relentless. Each day followed the same rhythm. Workers rose with the sun. They climbed the cliff face using rope ladders. Inside the growing tunnel, they worked by lamplight, cutting into limestone that had rested undisturbed since the world was young. The stone came away in careful pieces. Every chip was examined. Every layer revealed something about the Earth's deep history. The pharaoh visited often during those first months. He would stand at the entrance, watching men disappear into the darkness. The tunnel descended at a precise angle, calculated to align with certain stars. Amenhotep explained the geometry, the sacred proportions borrowed from temple designs and cosmic observations. The pharaoh nodded but did not truly listen. He wanted only to know when his eternal resting place would be ready. Seasons passed. The tunnel grew longer. Workers carved the first chamber, a vast room with a ceiling supported by pillars. Each pillar was shaped like a papyrus bundle, the plant that grows along riverbanks where life flourishes. Artists followed behind the stone cutters, covering every surface with images and text. The hieroglyphs told stories. They showed the pharaoh presenting offerings to the gods. They depicted his journey through the underworld, passing through 12 gates, one for each hour of night. They listed his titles, his victories, his divine lineage. Each symbol was carved with precision, then painted in colors mixed from minerals ground to powder. Blue came from ground lapis, red from ochre, yellow from arsenic compounds that made artists' hands tremble after long days, black from charcoal, white from limestone chalk. The colors glowed in lamplight, turning the chamber into something between a cave and a cosmos. The pharaoh came less often as years accumulated. His visits became formal inspections rather than excited explorations. He would walk through completed chambers, running his fingers along painted walls, saying little. Amenhotep watched his king age. New lines appeared around the royal eyes. Gray touched the edges of his ceremonial wig. Time was the one enemy no army could defeat. The workers noticed changes too. The tomb grew stranger as it deepened. Passages twisted in unexpected ways. Chambers opened onto other chambers through doorways that seemed to shift in the lamplight. Amenhotep's designs became more complex, more layered with hidden meanings. Some workers began to whisper. They spoke of sounds in the deep tunnels, not the echo of hammers or the scrape of chisels, something else. A breath of wind where no wind should flow. A voice, perhaps, or the memory of a voice, calling from the stone itself. The foreman dismissed such talk. Men working in darkness for long hours often imagined things. The mind played tricks when surrounded by images of gods and underworld journeys. Still, he noticed that some workers refused to enter certain passages. They would make excuses, claim illness, find reasons to work near the entrance where sunlight still reached. One worker, a young man named Waset, vanished during the night shift. His tools were found near the entrance to a newly carved passage, one that descended deeper than any other. The lamp still burned beside the tools. His water skin sat unopened, but Waset himself was gone. Search parties explored every tunnel, every side chamber, every shadowed corner. They called his name until their voices went hoarse. The echo answered, but the man did not. After 3 days, they gave up. The foreman performed a small ritual, leaving offerings near where the tools had been found. Then work continued. The desert was dangerous. Men were sometimes lost. This was accepted truth. But Amenhotep found himself troubled. He walked alone through the tomb's depths that night, carrying a single lamp. The passages he had designed from mathematical principles and sacred geometry now felt foreign. They curved in ways he did not remember planning. Chambers opened at angles that should not exist. He reached the deepest point, the passage where Waset had disappeared. The tunnel continued downward, carved more recently. But Amenhotep had not ordered this excavation. He studied the walls. The chisel marks were rough, hasty, made by someone working without proper planning. Then he saw the hieroglyphs. Someone had carved words into the raw stone, symbols that predated the current script. They were older, more primitive, but Amenhotep could still read them. The message was simple and terrible. The earth keeps what it is given, the earth takes what it desires. He backed away slowly. His lamp flickered. For a moment, in that guttering light, he thought he saw something move in the depths of the unauthorized tunnel. Not a person, not an animal, something else. A presence that had waited beneath the sand since before the first pharaoh raised the first stone. Amenhotep sealed the passage the next morning. He told the workers it had become unstable, prone to collapse. Heavy stones were rolled into place. Mortar was mixed and applied. Within a day, the entrance looked like solid wall. Only Amenhotep knew the truth, and he told no one. The pharaoh visited a week later. He had grown thinner. Illness had come to him, the kind that arrives slowly and never truly leaves. He walked through the chambers with effort, leaning on his staff. His breath came in shallow gasps. The painted gods watched from every wall, their eyes seeming to follow the aging king. He asked Amenhotep how much longer until completion. The architect calculated in his mind. At the current pace, perhaps 10 more years, perhaps 12. The pharaoh's face fell. He did not have 12 years. This was obvious to both men, though neither spoke it aloud. The pharaoh made a decision. Work would accelerate. More workers would be hired. Shifts would extend into the night. Money was no concern. Time was everything. The tomb must be ready. It must be perfect. It must be eternal. Amenhotep bowed and obeyed. But something had changed in him after finding that unauthorized passage. He began to add his own secrets to the design, small changes. A doorway that led nowhere, a chamber with no entrance marked on any plan, a staircase that descended 7 steps, then stopped at blank stone. These additions felt necessary, though he could not have explained why. The tomb was no longer just a monument to the pharaoh's vanity. It was becoming something else, a puzzle, a riddle, a question asked of the future. The workers sensed the change. They moved through passages with greater unease. Lamps were kept burning at all hours. No one worked alone. The foreman organized groups of 4, never fewer. Even then, men reported strange experiences. A touch on the shoulder where no one stood. Footsteps echoing from empty chambers. Once, an entire crew insisted they heard chanting in an ancient language, a prayer or spell that seemed to come from the stone itself. The artists painted faster, covering walls with images that grew increasingly strange. The pharaoh's journey through the underworld became more detailed, more frightening. The demons that guarded each gate were rendered with terrible care. Their teeth were sharp as daggers. Their eyes held ancient hunger. One artist painted the same demon 12 times in a row, each version slightly different, as if watching the creature move through frozen time. The pharaoh's health declined. He came to the tomb one final time, carried in a litter by strong servants. They bore him deep into the tunnels to the burial chamber that was still incomplete. He lay in the litter, staring up at the ceiling where artists were painting the sky goddess Nut, her star-covered body arcing over all creation. Amenhotep stood beside the litter. The pharaoh's breath was quiet, labored. His skin had taken on the color of old papyrus. He spoke in a whisper. "Will it be ready?" The architect looked around the chamber. So much work remained. The sarcophagus had not been carved. The canopic jars were unfinished. Half the wall space showed bare stone, like he knew the answer. But he said, "Yes, my king, it will be ready." The pharaoh smiled. Perhaps he believed. Perhaps he simply wanted to believe. He was carried back to the palace. Amenhotep never saw him again. 3 months later, the pharaoh died. The news reached the tomb at dawn. Work stopped. Men stood in silence, tools hanging loose in their hands. A kingdom's worth of prayers began, rituals that would continue for 70 days while the body was prepared for burial. Amenhotep walked alone to the burial chamber. It was still unfinished. The ceiling remained half-painted. The floor lacked its final polishing. The walls showed gaps in the hieroglyphic spells. The pharaoh's dream of perfection would remain forever incomplete. The architect's secret. The funeral preparations consumed the kingdom. Priests worked day and night, removing organs, treating the body with natron salt, wrapping it in linen soaked with resin. Each step followed traditions older than memory. The process could not be rushed. The body must be preserved properly or the soul would suffer in the afterlife. Amenhotep returned to the tomb with new purpose. He had 70 days. In that time, he would complete enough to make the burial possible, but he would also add something more, something the pharaoh had never requested, something that would speak truth to eternity. He chose a dozen workers, men he trusted, men who had been with the project from the beginning. He brought them to a section of the tomb that appeared finished, a corridor lined with painted walls, images of the pharaoh making offerings to Osiris, lord of the dead. Beautiful work, sacred work. But Amenhotep knew something others did not. Behind one painted wall lay empty space, a chamber he had designed but never marked on official plans. He had the workers carefully remove sections of the painted plaster, revealing a narrow doorway. Beyond it, darkness waited. They entered single file, lamps held high. The hidden chamber was small, barely large enough for 10 men to stand. The walls were bare stone, untouched by chisel or paint. It felt older than the rest of the tomb. Amenhotep sometimes wondered if he had discovered this space rather than created it. Perhaps it had always been here, waiting. He ordered the workers to begin carving, but not images of the pharaoh, not spells for protection or prayers for eternal life. Instead, they carved the truth, simple hieroglyphs that told a different story. They wrote about the workers who had labored here, the men whose names appeared nowhere else in the tomb, the men who had cut stone until their hands bled, the artists who had breathed toxic paint fumes until their lungs failed, the foreman who had maintained order through patience and wisdom. Even Kamwaset, who had vanished, was remembered. They carved other truths as well. The cost of this monument in grain and gold, the villages that had sent their sons to work here year after year, the families who had waited for men who sometimes did not return. The pharaoh had dreamed of immortality. These walls showed the price of dreams. Amenhotep supervised every symbol. This was not rebellion. He felt no anger toward the pharaoh. This was something else. Balance, perhaps, or honesty. The gods were said to value truth above all else. In the Hall of Judgment, hearts were weighed against the feather of Ma'at, goddess of truth and order. A heart heavy with lies would fail that test. This chamber would be the tomb's heart, and it would be honest. The work took 2 weeks. When finished, the workers carefully replaced the plaster, painted over the doorway, and restored the images of the pharaoh and Osiris. No trace remained of the entrance. The hidden chamber vanished back into the stone. Amenhotep thanked the workers. He gave each man extra payment from his own funds. Then he made them swear an oath. They would tell no one about the chamber. Not their families, not the priests, not their fellow workers. The secret would die with them. They agreed. They understood that some truths were too dangerous to speak aloud. The main burial chamber still needed work. Amenhotep focused his efforts there. Artists completed the ceiling painting. Nut's star-covered body now stretched across the entire space, painted in deep blue with gold stars that caught lamplight like the real night sky. The goddess seemed to watch those below, her face serene and eternal. The walls received their final layers of hieroglyphs. Spells from the Book of the Dead covered every available surface. These were the words that would guide the pharaoh's soul through the underworld. Prayers to help him answer the riddles posed by demon guardians. Formulas to transform him into different creatures should danger arise. Magic to ensure his heart remained light during judgment. Workers brought the sarcophagus, a massive stone box carved from a single piece of red granite. It had taken years to create, years more to transport from distant quarries. The stone came from the south, from places where the Nile ran through deep gorges. 20 men had died bringing it north. The pharaoh would never know their names. The sarcophagus was lowered into place with ropes and wooden rollers. It settled with a sound like thunder, the stone base meeting the stone floor. The lid waited nearby, equally massive. When the burial was complete, that lid would be sealed with mortar. Nothing would move it again. Canopic jars were arranged in a niche carved into the wall. 4 jars, each topped with a different god's head. Duamutef with the jackal head would guard the stomach. Kebesenuef with the falcon head would protect the intestines. Happy with the baboon head would watch over the lungs. Imseti with the human head would keep the liver safe. Each organ removed during mummification would rest in its proper jar, preserved for eternity. The priests arrived 10 days before the funeral. They inspected every chamber, every corridor, every painted image. They burned incense in clay braziers. The smoke drifted through passages, filling the tomb with the scent of myrrh and frankincense. They chanted prayers, their voices echoing until the words became a constant whisper in the stone. Amenhotep walked with them, answering questions about the tomb's design. They asked about the alignment of the entrance, which faced exactly east to greet the rising sun. They inquired about the placement of protective symbols, the eyes of Horus that watched from corners, the scarab beetles that represented rebirth and transformation. Everything met with their approval. But at night, when the priests returned to their temple, Amenhotep walked the tomb alone. He moved through familiar passages that now felt strange. He had designed this place. Every angle, every proportion had come from his mind. Yet, it no longer felt like his creation. The tomb had taken on its own character, its own presence. He found himself drawn to areas he usually avoided, the deep passages where shadows gathered thick, the chambers where lamplight seemed dimmer, as if the darkness resisted illumination. Once, while standing in a corridor far from the entrance, he heard something. Not the wind, not water dripping from stone. Something closer to breath. Long, slow inhalations and exhalations, as if the tomb itself were alive and sleeping. He told himself this was imagination. Stone did not breathe. Tombs did not live. Yet the sound continued, so faint he might have invented it, but present enough to make the hair on his arms rise. The hidden chamber called to him. He resisted for 3 days. But on the 4th night, unable to sleep, he returned. He brought a single lamp. With careful hands, he removed the plaster covering the secret doorway. The gap opened like a mouth. Cool air flowed out, touching his face. He entered. The carved hieroglyphs looked different in the lone lamp's glow. The names of workers seemed to shift, letters rearranging themselves at the edge of vision. The truth carved here felt heavier, more significant. This chamber was the tomb's actual heart. The burial chamber with its gold and spells was theater. This small space held reality. Amenhotep sat on the stone floor. The lamp beside him cast his shadow large against the wall. He thought about the pharaoh now being wrapped in linen in the palace. He thought about all the pharaohs before, each one convinced of their own immortality, each one now dust inside sealed tombs. He thought about the workers who would complete this project, then move on to the next tomb and the next, until they too became names carved in hidden places. A sound made him look up. Someone stood in the doorway, or something. The shape was wrong for a person. Too tall, too thin. It seemed to be made of shadow, held together by ancient intention. The lamp flickered, but did not go out. Amenhotep did not move. Fear had paralyzed his limbs. The shape came closer. It had no face he could discern, no features at all. Yet he felt it regarding him, studying him with senses beyond sight. Then it spoke. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, from the stone and the air and the darkness between. It used no language Amenhotep knew, yet he understood. The meaning arrived in his mind, fully formed, clear as hieroglyphs cut into fresh stone. You have made a true place in a house of lies. The earth acknowledges this. The deep places remember. But know this, builder of tombs, the one who comes here will not rest. His dream of forever will become forever's prison. This is the price of vanity that reaches too far. The stone keeps what it is given. The shape dissolved. Shadow returned to shadow. The lamp's flame steadied. Amenhotep sat alone in the chamber, his heart hammering against his ribs. He fled. He replaced the plaster with shaking hands, working by lamplight until the doorway vanished once more. Then he walked to the entrance of the tomb and stood beneath the stars until dawn. The desert stretched before him, endless and patient. It had swallowed countless pharaohs, countless monuments, countless dreams of immortality. This tomb would join all the others. Sand would bury it eventually. Wind would erase it from memory. But something would remain. The hidden chamber with its truth carved in stone, the workers' names, the honest reckoning of what this place had cost. Perhaps that was the only real immortality available. Not in grand monuments, but in small acts of honesty that survived in darkness. The day of the funeral arrived. The entire kingdom gathered to witness the pharaoh's final journey. His mummy was brought on a golden sled pulled by oxen. Priests walked alongside, chanting prayers without pause. Professional mourners wailed and threw dust on their heads. The procession moved slowly from the palace to the tomb, taking most of the morning to cover ground that normally required an hour. Amenhotep waited at the tomb entrance. He wore his finest linen, a ceremonial kilt embroidered with sacred symbols. Around his neck hung an amulet of the Eye of Horus. His hands trembled slightly, not from age, though he felt old, from knowledge, from what he had seen and heard in the hidden chamber. The mummy was carried inside. Priests bore it down the long passages, through chambers painted with images of paradise and judgment, past demons with hungry eyes and gods with patient faces. The funeral party followed, a long line of nobles and officials and family members. Their footsteps echoed. Their breath formed clouds of mist in the cool underground air. In the burial chamber, the mummy was placed inside the sarcophagus. More prayers, more incense. The priests arranged sacred objects around the body. Food for the journey. Wine in sealed jars, jewelry of gold and lapis, weapons should the dead king need to defend himself. Servants, represented by small statues, hundreds of them, each one magically animated to serve in the afterlife. The pharaoh's widow stood nearby, her face hidden behind a veil. She swayed slightly, attendants supported her arms. She had been given poppy tea to ease the grief, but no drug could truly touch this loss. She had been queen. Now she was widow. Her power would fade like morning mist. Amenhotep watched it all from the back of the chamber. He alone knew about the hidden room. He alone had spoken with the thing in the shadows, or dreamed he had spoken with it. He was no longer certain which. The line between waking and sleeping had blurred during these final days. The ceremony concluded. The massive stone lid was lowered onto the sarcophagus, guided by ropes and prayers. It settled with a grinding sound that seemed to travel through the bedrock. Priests began applying mortar to seal the gap. There would be no opening this again. The pharaoh's body would rest here until the end of time. Or until thieves found a way in. This was the reality no one spoke. Every tomb, no matter how clever its design, eventually fell to men with tools and greed. The pharaoh's treasures would be scattered. His mummy would be disturbed, unwrapped, destroyed. All his preparation, all his gold, all his prayers would come to nothing. Amenhotep felt a moment of profound sadness. Not for the pharaoh specifically, but for the futility of it all. Humans grasped at immortality like children trying to catch sunlight in their hands. The light always slipped through. The darkness always returned. The funeral party withdrew from the burial chamber. Workers began sealing the entrance. Large stone blocks were rolled into place. Mortar was mixed and applied, layer after layer, until the doorway became solid wall. More workers arrived with baskets of debris. They filled the corridor with rubble, making the tomb's entrance invisible, just another section of cliff face. Outside, the desert sun blazed. Amenhotep stood with other workers, watching the final baskets of stone chips being carried inside. Soon nothing would remain to show where the tomb's entrance had been. The pharaoh had planned for secrecy. No visible monument, no marker, just stone and sand and silence. The workers dispersed. The priests returned to their temples. The nobles went back to their estates. Within a day, the site stood empty. Wind began its patient work, smoothing sand, erasing footprints. Amenhotep walked away slowly. His work was done. He would design other tombs, smaller ones, for nobles who could afford his skills. But nothing would match this. This had been his masterpiece, a monument to vanity that contained a secret heart of truth. Perhaps that balance was the best any builder could achieve. He looked back once. The cliff face showed no sign of the tomb. Already it looked as it had before work began. The desert was very good at keeping secrets. The stone remembered everything but told nothing. The desert's memory time passed in the way it always does. Days became seasons. Seasons became years. Years accumulated into centuries. The kingdom that had buried the pharaoh faded. New dynasties rose. New pharaohs built new tombs. The old sites were forgotten, lost beneath shifting sands. But the tomb remained. Deep beneath the surface, sealed chambers waited in perfect darkness. The painted gods continued their eternal vigil, unseen but present. The mummy rested in its stone sarcophagus. The hidden chamber held its secrets, and something else dwelled there too. The presence that had spoken to Amenhotep. The thing made of shadow and ancient intention. It had not left. Perhaps it had never truly arrived. Perhaps it had always been there, woven into the bedrock, waiting for humans to come and go. Thieves found the tomb, of course. They always did. Records do not say exactly when, but likely within a few hundred years. Men who knew the old stories, who had heard whispers about a pharaoh buried alone in a remote cliff. They brought tools and determination. The entrance had been well hidden, but stone speaks to those who know how to listen. They found signs. A slight difference in rock color where the doorway had been sealed. Traces of mortar that had not quite matched the surrounding stone. They worked at night, using the moon for light, knowing tomb robbing carried severe punishment if caught. It took them weeks to break through. The passage had been thoroughly blocked. But persistence won. Eventually, their tools broke through into open space. Cool air flowed out, carrying the scent of antiquity. They lit torches and entered. The corridor descended into earth. Their torches cast wild shadows on painted walls. Gods and demons watched them pass. The thieves moved quickly, looking for the burial chamber, caring nothing for the artistry around them. They found it. The sealed doorway was obvious, carefully mortared stones blocking the way. They smashed through with hammers. The sound echoed through empty chambers, a desecration that would have horrified the priests who had sealed this place with such care. Inside the burial chamber, torchlight revealed wonders. Gold gleamed from every surface. Jewelry lay in careful arrangements. The canopic jars stood in their niche, topped with divine heads. The sarcophagus dominated the center, massive and silent. The thieves worked with practiced efficiency. They gathered everything portable: gold collars, rings, bracelets, weapons with gilded handles, jars of precious oil. They worked through the night, making multiple trips to carry their treasures out. The sarcophagus they could not move, but they tried to open it. They brought pry bars, attempting to shift the massive lid. It would not budge. The seal had been perfect. Eventually frustrated, they gave up. The mummy would remain undisturbed. They had enough treasure without it. As they worked, one thief noticed something odd. A section of wall that looked different. The paint seemed newer, the surface smoother. He called others over. They studied it in torchlight. Perhaps there was another chamber beyond? More treasure hidden away? They began to chip at the plaster. It came away easily, revealing a narrow doorway. They squeezed through one by one, torches held high. The small chamber beyond held no gold, no jewelry, just walls covered in hieroglyphs. The thieves could not read ancient script. To them, this was worthless. But one among them had some education. He studied the carvings by flickering light, sounding out the symbols slowly. Names, dates, accounts of work, and cost. This was not a treasure chamber. This was a record, a history written by people long dead. The educated thief felt something shift in his understanding. He looked around at the small space, at the careful carving, at the names of workers preserved in stone. This place mattered more than the gold they had taken. This was memory itself, carved and saved. He tried to explain to the others. They laughed at him. Words in stone would not feed their families. They had come for treasure, not history. They left the chamber, replaced the plaster roughly, and departed with their loot. But the educated thief returned. He came back the next night, alone, carrying papyrus and reed pen. He sat in the hidden chamber by lamplight and copied the hieroglyphs. Every name, every date, every record of labor and cost. It took him 3 nights to copy it all. Then he sealed the chamber again and left. History does not record what he did with his copies. Perhaps they survived. Perhaps they rotted away in some forgotten archive. Perhaps he showed them to scholars who dismissed them as forgeries. The treasure he and his companions stole was melted down, sold, scattered across markets. The gold became new jewelry for wealthy merchants. The precious oils were used to anoint the living. Nothing remained to show where these objects had come from. The tomb stood empty, robbed, despoiled, but not entirely destroyed. The mummy still rested in its sarcophagus, undisturbed. The painted walls remained, though dusty now, touched by thieves' hands. The hidden chamber waited in darkness, its secrets preserved even though the entrance had been found. More centuries passed. The land changed hands. Conquerors came and went. Greek rulers replaced Egyptian pharaohs, then Romans, then others. The old religion faded. New gods arrived, demanding different rituals. The ancient tombs became curiosities, then forgotten structures, then invisible ruins beneath endless sand. But in certain libraries, far from the desert, scholars studied ancient texts. They read about the great pharaohs. They examined fragments of hieroglyphic records. They dreamed of finding tombs, of uncovering treasures and knowledge buried in stone. As knowledge grew, as techniques improved, as the world became smaller through trade and travel, those dreams became possible. The first archaeologists arrived in the desert wearing European clothes that made no sense in the heat. They brought scientific methods, careful documentation, respect for the past. They were nothing like the ancient thieves. These scholars wanted knowledge, not gold. They saw tombs as windows into vanished worlds. They rediscovered many burial sites. They mapped the royal valleys where pharaohs had been interred. They excavated with care, preserving every fragment, recording every detail. Museums filled with mummies and artifacts. The world marveled at Egypt's grandeur. But some tombs remained hidden, the remote ones, the ones that had been cleverly concealed. The pharaoh's tomb was among these. Its location had been lost so thoroughly that no record remained. The cliff face where it rested showed no sign. Sand had done its work well. Then, in a year that does not matter, because this story exists outside specific time, a young archaeologist named Sarah made a discovery. She had been studying ancient quarry records, tracking where stone had been sourced for royal projects. One set of documents mentioned a tomb in a remote location, carved from local limestone rather than transported granite. The description was vague, but it gave general directions. West of the river, north of a certain temple ruin, near cliffs that glowed red at sunset. Sarah became obsessed. She convinced her university to fund an expedition. She assembled a team. They arrived in spring when the desert heat was bearable. They set up camp near the described location. Then began the slow work of surveying, of using ground-penetrating radar, of studying rock formations for signs of human intervention. For 2 weeks, they found nothing. The team grew discouraged. Funding was limited. They could not search forever. Sarah walked the cliff base each evening, watching the stone turn red as the sun descended. Somewhere here, she felt certain, lay a tomb waiting to be found. On the 16th day, a local worker pointed out something unusual. A slight discoloration in the rock, barely visible even in direct light. Sarah studied it closely. She touched the stone. It felt different, smoother. She called the team. They worked carefully, removing the outer layer of rock that centuries of wind had deposited. Beneath it, mortar appeared. Ancient mortar, crumbling but present. They had found the entrance. The team celebrated that night, though Sarah remained quiet. She felt the weight of what they were about to do. They would break into a sealed tomb. They would disturb what had rested for millennia. Yes, it was in the name of knowledge. Yes, they would preserve and protect. But still, they were trespassers in the house of death. Opening the entrance took a full day. They documented everything. Photographs captured each stage of the process. Drawings recorded the exact placement of every stone. When the last block was removed, they shone flashlights into the darkness beyond. A passage descended into earth. Painted walls showed gods and hieroglyphs, colors still bright after so many centuries. Sarah felt her breath catch. They had found something extraordinary. They entered slowly, reverently. Modern battery-powered lights replaced ancient torches, but the feeling was similar. They were entering a world that had closed itself to the living very long ago. Each chamber they passed through brought new wonders. The artistry was exceptional, the preservation remarkable. Then they reached the burial chamber. The sarcophagus sat in the center, exactly where priests had placed it millennia before. The lid was intact, though the room showed signs of ancient theft. The canopic jars were missing. Much gold was gone. But the essential structure remained. Sarah's team worked for weeks, documenting everything. They photographed every wall, every hieroglyph. They took samples of paint for analysis. They made detailed maps of the tomb's layout. Modern archaeology was meticulous, recording data that earlier explorers had ignored. One evening, Sarah was working alone in a corridor, measuring wall distances for the map. Her light caught something odd. A section of wall where the paint seemed slightly different. She moved closer. Up close, the difference was clear. This area had been repaired at some point. The plaster was newer. She called her team. Together, they carefully removed the patch. Behind it, a narrow doorway appeared. They entered the hidden chamber with electric lights that illuminated every corner. The walls were covered in hieroglyphs, but these were different from the ones in the main tomb. Sarah began to read, her team gathering around. Names. Hundreds of them. Workers who had built this place. Artists who had painted its walls. the foremen who had organized the labor, men who had carried stone, mixed mortar, carved passages deep into living rock, each name carefully preserved, more than names. Records of what the work had cost, grain paid to workers, copper tools worn down and replaced, the time spent, years and years of human effort, all documented here in simple, honest language. No grand claims of divine kingship, no prayers for eternal life, just the truth of what it took to build a tomb. Sarah felt tears on her face. She did not wipe them away. Her team stood silent. They had found tombs before. They had studied mummies and treasures and sacred texts. But this was different. This was the voice of ordinary people speaking across millennia. This was history that no pharaoh had intended to preserve. They spent 3 days in that small chamber, recording every symbol. Sarah worked with intense focus, knowing this discovery mattered more than gold or jewels. These were the invisible people who had built monuments. These were the hands that shaped stone. These were the lives that vanished into dust while their creations endured. One name stood out: Amenhotep, chief architect. He had signed his work at the bottom of the longest inscription. Below his name, he had added a final line. Sarah translated it slowly, making sure she understood correctly. The stone remembers what we forget. The earth keeps what we lose, but truth carved deep enough survives even time. The words resonated. Sarah thought about all the pharaohs buried in elaborate tombs, their names proclaimed loudly, their deeds exaggerated. Most of those names meant nothing now. Scholars knew them only as dates and sequences, faces on statues worn smooth by sand. But here, in this forgotten chamber, workers' names survived. People who had lived and died unknown were suddenly visible again. The team finished their work in the tomb. They sealed the entrance again, but not permanently. A metal door was installed to protect the site while allowing future scholars access. The artifacts they found, the few that ancient thieves had missed, were cataloged and sent to museums. The sarcophagus remained where it lay. Moving it would have required destructive methods. Better to leave it resting. Sarah published her findings. Academic journals printed her photographs and translations. The hidden chamber became famous among scholars. Conferences discussed its implications. Here was proof that ancient Egypt was built by real people, not just divine kings and mysterious priests. Here was evidence of labor and cost and human effort. But outside academic circles, few people cared. The tomb held no gold for museums to display. The pharaoh's name remained unknown. No curse had befallen the excavators. No treasures appeared in dramatic photographs. The discovery was important but not spectacular. It made news briefly, then faded from public attention. Sarah did not mind. She returned to the tomb several times over the years. Each visit, she spent time in the hidden chamber, sitting quietly among the carved names. She felt connected to something larger than archaeology, some thread that linked past to present, worker to scholar, truth to truth. On her final visit, years later, she was old and moved slowly. The desert heat bothered her more than it once had, but she made the journey one last time. She entered the tomb alone, carrying a single flashlight, down the familiar passages, through chambers she had memorized, to the hidden room. She sat on the stone floor as Amenhotep once had. The carved names surrounded her. She read them again, though she knew them by heart. Then she took out a chisel and hammer from her bag, modern tools, but serving an ancient purpose. In a corner of the chamber, in a space left bare, she carved her own name. Below it, she carved the names of her team members, the people who had helped excavate and document this place. Then she carved the date and a single line. We came. We learned. We remembered. It was not strictly allowed. Archaeologists were supposed to preserve, not add to ancient sites. But Sarah was old and beyond caring about rules. This chamber was about truth. She had spent her life uncovering it. Now she added her small piece to the record. She left the tomb as the sun was setting. The cliff face glowed red, just as it had when workers first arrived thousands of years before. The desert stretched endless in all directions. Sand and stone and sky, empty, eternal, beautiful in its indifference. Sarah never returned. She died 2 years later in a city far from the desert. Her obituary mentioned her discovery of the hidden chamber. A few colleagues attended her funeral. Then she too became another name, another scholar among thousands, mostly forgotten. But in the tomb, her name remained, carved in stone beside the ancient workers. another link in a chain that stretched back to the beginning and forward to some unknowable end. The desert did not care, the stone did not judge, it simply kept what it was given. Years became decades, decades accumulated. The tomb waited in darkness, visited occasionally by scholars who sought permission to study it. Each visitor stood in the hidden chamber and read the names. Each one left changed in some small way. Knowledge that humans had always been human, that workers had always labored, that truth had always mattered. The pharaoh's dream of immortality had failed, his name was lost. His body remained sealed but forgotten. No prayers were said for him, no offerings left. He had wanted to be remembered forever and ended up remembered by no one. But the workers lived on. Their names in stone survived. Amenhotep's truth endured. The hidden chamber kept its secrets while simultaneously revealing them to anyone patient enough to enter and read. This was the paradox at the tomb's heart: concealment that preserved, silence that spoke. Outside, the desert continued its endless work. Wind moved sand grain by grain, storms buried and revealed. Heat cracked stone, cold contracted it. The slow erosion of time ground everything down. But stone was patient, stone could wait. What was carved deep enough would last longer than memory. At night, when no scholars visited, when no lights disturbed the darkness, the tomb rested. The painted gods maintained their vigil. The mummy lay unchanged in its sarcophagus. The hidden chamber held its names, and perhaps in the deepest passages, in places where no modern light had reached, the presence remained. The shadow, the ancient intention, the thing that had spoken to Amenhotep, if it was real, if it had ever been real, or if it was simply the tomb itself, the weight of stone and time and human hope all compressed into something that seemed alive. The boundary between metaphor and reality had always been thin in tombs. Places designed to bridge life and death inevitably became strange, caught between states. The desert kept its secrets. The stone remembered. The names waited. And slowly, inevitably, sand began to accumulate at the tomb's entrance. Wind carried it. Gravity pulled it down. Year after year, grain by grain, the dunes grew higher. The metal door that archaeologists had installed became harder to reach, then difficult, then nearly impossible. Funding for expeditions dried up. Universities focused on newer discoveries. The remote location made visits impractical. Years passed between scholarly visits, then decades. The tomb began its slow return to obscurity. Eventually, the entrance was buried again. Sand covered the metal door, then covered the sand that covered the door. The cliff face looked as it had before humans ever touched it. The tomb vanished from sight once more. Records of its location existed in archives, filed away, occasionally referenced but rarely consulted. The cycle had completed. Hidden, found, studied, forgotten, hidden again. Perhaps this was the natural rhythm. Perhaps tombs were meant to emerge briefly into light before darkness reclaimed them. Perhaps the pharaoh's instinct had been correct, even if his reasoning was flawed. Not eternal visibility, but eternal presence. Not fame, but simple existence, continuing whether witnessed or not. Deep beneath the sand, beneath the stone, the tomb rested. The chambers waited. The paintings faded slowly, colors dimming as microscopic chemical changes accumulated across centuries. The mummy dried further, becoming less human, more artifact. The canopic jars, long since emptied by thieves, gathered dust, but the hidden chamber remained unchanged. Carved stone did not fade. Words cut deep into limestone would outlast paint, outlast plaster, outlast everything except the stone itself. The names endured. The truth survived. Amenhotep's final message continued to exist, read by no one but present. This was immortality of a sort. Not the kind the pharaoh had wanted, not glory or worship or eternal remembrance in prayers, just persistence, just existence through time, the stubborn refusal of carved stone to completely forget. And perhaps that was enough. Perhaps that was all anyone could hope for. To leave some mark, however small, to carve some truth, however simple, to add some small thing to the endless record of human effort and hope and struggle against the dark. The desert wind blew, sand shifted, stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. The tomb waited beneath it all, patient and silent. A monument to vanity that had become a monument to truth. A pharaoh's dream that had transformed into a worker's legacy. A house of death that preserved life in the only way that mattered. In the end, the earth kept what it was given. The stone remembered, and deep in hidden chambers, names survived. Not famous names, not powerful names, Just names, just people, just the simple, profound truth that humans had been here, had worked, had lived, had mattered. The tomb would remain through empires rising and falling, through languages being born and dying, through beliefs changing and knowledge accumulating. It would remain beneath the sand, beneath the stone, beneath the endless sky, a secret that was not quite secret, a truth that was not quite forgotten. And if, in some distant future, someone found it again, if sand was cleared and stone unsealed and darkness illuminated once more, the names would be waiting. The truth would be ready. Amenhotep's message would speak across whatever span of time had passed. The stone remembers what we forget. The earth keeps what we lose. But truth carved deep enough survives even time. The desert offered no comment. It simply continued, as it always had, as it always would, keeping its secrets, remembering everything, revealing nothing until the moment was right, and then perhaps revealing more than anyone expected. The stars above moved in their slow dance. Constellations that ancient Egyptians had named and worshipped rotated through the night. Below, in darkness, the tomb waited. Above, in space, light traveled from distant suns. Between earth and sky, past and future, forgetting and remembering, the thin line of present stretched taut. And somewhere in that tension, in that balance, the tomb existed. Not dead, not alive, simply there, simply enduring. A whisper of the unfinished, because nothing is ever truly finished. A question asked of eternity, because every tomb is a question. A prayer carved in stone, because every human act of creation is a prayer of sorts. The pharaoh had dreamed of forever. He had received it, but not in the way he imagined. Not as glory, as silence, not as remembrance, as absence, not as victory over death, as perfect surrender to it. His tomb was his eternity. His stone prison was his stone heaven. He had gotten exactly what he asked for, in the way that ancient stories always give exactly what is asked for, with all the irony that entails. The workers had asked for nothing. They had simply carved their names in a hidden place, hoping someone might find them. And someone had. And someone else would again. This was there forever. Not grand, not golden, just real, just true, just enough. The desert wind carried sand across the buried entrance, grain after grain, adding to the concealment. The work of wind is slow but thorough. Give it enough time and it buries mountains. Give it enough time and it reveals them again. The cycle continues, always. Beneath the sand, beneath the stone, beneath the weight of time and silence and forgetting, the tomb waited. The names waited. The truth waited, patient as only stone can be patient, still as only death can be still. Present as only the past can be present, fully there but untouchable, complete but unknown. And this, finally, was the answer to the pharaoh's question. This was the solution to the riddle of immortality, not to be remembered by everyone, but to exist somewhere, somehow, in some form beyond the reach of time's complete erasure, to leave a mark deep enough that it outlasts memory itself. The tomb achieved this, not through its grandeur, which thieves had stripped, not through its art, which time was slowly fading, but through its hidden heart, through the truth carved in darkness, through names that spoke of real people who had lived real lives, through the simple persistence of stone that remembered when nothing else could. The whisper of the unfinished tomb was this, that nothing is ever truly finished, that every ending is also a beginning, that every burial is also a preservation, that every attempt to escape time becomes part of time itself, that the dream of forever is itself eternal, even as each dreamer turns to dust. The wind blew. The sand shifted, the stars moved, the tomb waited, and somewhere in all of this, in the space between what was and what would be, the truth survived. Quiet, patient, undeniable. This is what the stone remembered. This is what the earth kept. This is what survived when everything else had fallen to dust. Not the pharaoh's glory, not his gold, not his name, but something more fundamental, more true, more lasting. The simple fact that people had been here, that they had worked, that they had cared, that they had tried in their own way to touch forever. And in that trying, in that reaching, in that carving of names in hidden darkness, they had succeeded more completely than any king. The desert held this knowledge without knowing it. The stone preserved this truth without understanding it. The tomb kept its secret while revealing it to anyone patient enough to listen. And the whisper continued, faint but constant from beneath the sand, from beneath the stone, from beneath the endless weight of time. We were here, we lived, we mattered. Remember us? And in the hidden chamber, carved deep in limestone that would outlast empires, the names replied, We remember. We always will. The stone forgets nothing.